Is this on? Can you hear me? Good. Yes. Jim introduced me at the beginning by saying that I was the entertainment, or I was the light contributor. I'm not entirely comfortable with that. So I'm now going to talk about movies. I did write a book about the origin of life, which had some astrobiology in it. But unfortunately, Jim asked all of the people whose work I was writing about to also contribute to the book, so I could only write about movies. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of my life in the movies, because when I was accounting for on the movies that I've worked on, pretty much all of them feature aliens in some capacity. The first, well, actually, I was a scientific consultant on a film about one of Björk's albums. And Björk's kind of alien, so no, it's a bit tenuous. So I'm not gonna have that. But the first, as Jim mentioned, was a film called Kingsman: The Secret Service. Has anyone seen that? Did you like it? Okay, it's okay. It's okay. It's quite good fun. Now, my job on that, it's not about aliens at all. But my job on that film, there's a scene in which Colin Firth, who's a sort of super spy, is about to rescue this climate scientist here. This was filmed at Imperial, just over the way in South Kensington, just before this climate scientist's head explodes for reasons that are in the film. And my job, and I spent 3 days doing this, was to decorate the blackboards. Right? And to make them as sciencey as possible. And there was a point where the director came in and looked at them and went, "They're not sciencey enough, keep going." And I got another day's pay out of that, which was really nice. Now, he's a climate scientist, and so these are decorated with some, I don't know, I just got a load of climate science papers and then drew the graphs out of them. And in doing jobs like this, because I'm quite childish, I do like to hide secret messages in everything that I do, and all of my books contain secret messages. But, and this is when it occurred to me when I was thinking about what I was going to talk about tonight in terms of aliens, there's absolutely no aliens in this film whatsoever, until I remembered that if you look very, very carefully, that graph there is the habitable zone graph. Right, and you can't quite make it out. This is the best still shot I could get from the DVD. In fact, I had to take it on my phone. That there, you can just see the words liquid water, right? And that bit there with the is this right, Louisa? This is the Goldilocks zone that she was just referring to. And now the following thing happened. The production designer came in when I was sciencifying the blackboards. And we were chatting, and we were talking about Colin Firth and Samuel L. Jackson's in the film, and I said, "Who is the professor? Who's the actor?" And she said, "I don't know, some guy I've never heard of." And she got the cast sheet out of her pocket, and this hadn't been announced in the press at this point. She got the cast sheet out and looked at it and said, "It's a guy called Mark Hamill." And I went, "Fuck! I'm decorating Luke Skywalker's blackboard." Which was a nice thing to do. Anyway, what you can't see on this is that word there says Earth. Well, I rubbed out all the planets of the solar system and replaced them with ones from Star Wars. So that actually says, that's Tatooine, that's Dagobah in there, that one is Naboo. As I said, I'm incredibly childish. The next film, so that Jim mentioned, I worked on World War Z, which is a zombie film, also doesn't involve aliens. And I only include this because clearly I got my name on a list of scientists who could decorate blackboards and make them very sciencey. Because my contribution to World War Z was I spent 3 days actually whiteboards in this case, and making them look like the type of blackboards that disease epidemiologists would have after a zombie outbreak. Unfortunately, all of my scenes were cut from the final film. I still got paid, so it was fine. Those were small jobs. I worked as one of the scientific consultants on a film called Ex Machina, which was out last year, and we're very proud of this film. The other scientific consultant's a colleague of Anil's called Mary Shanahan, and That isn't about aliens, it's about AI and consciousness, and if you haven't seen it, you really must, because I truly think it's one of the best films of the 21st century. You can nod at this point. Very good. And that led, so I've been working with Alex Garland, who is the writer and director of Ex Machina for a few years now, and including, as Jim mentioned, on his latest film, which is called Annihilation. Now, Annihilation is an adaptation of a science fiction novel by a guy called Jeff Vandermeer, which some of you may have read. It's been quite popular. And this is the adaptation of it. It does star Natalie Portman as a geneticist who's interested in the origin of life. I don't know how that happened, but if I'm going to be embodied on screen, then I would want it to be by Natalie Portman. Now, unfortunately, I am legally not allowed to tell you anything about this film. It is, I've seen a rough cut of it, and it is Ex Machina good. It's not out until September, and I really can't tell you anything more about it, or else I will be sued. I will say the alien is nothing like anything you've ever seen ever before, and this is a key idea that one of the ideas that I talk about in my chapter in the book, how we represent aliens on screen, and why almost always people get it wrong. Now, after I've been working on Annihilation, I spent a large chunk of the summer working on another science fiction film, which is called Life. Now, the trailer for Life came out last week, and if you haven't seen it, do go and have a look at it. So you can't quite, that's Jake Gyllenhaal, and that's Ryan Reynolds, the back of Ryan Reynolds' head. That's Deadpool. And it's written by the Deadpool writers, and it is a science fiction horror film that's set on the International Space Station at some point in the very near future. The basic plot is that a recovery mission from Mars picks up from a current Martian lander mission a sample which has been fired to the International Space Station for analysis because there's something interesting in it. Now, for legal reasons, I can't tell you anything more about this film. However, this is a still shot from the trailer. That is the only shot you get and the only indication you get of, well, about 6 weeks of my life during the summer. That is something of interest. Obviously, things go particularly badly in this film after they recover that thing. It's also, in a completely different way, an alien that you've never seen before, and I can't say anything more about it. Just to prove, this is me on set. And in fact, this was an extreme close-up shot we were doing, and I think this is in the film. So I'm kind of hoping that the actor playing the scientist is actually a black guy, and I'm hoping you can't see the fact that I'm not a black guy because I'm wearing those thick rubber gloves. I'm just going to show you one more thing because the thing I was saying about hiding things in all of my work. This is a shot from the trailer. So this is the living headquarters on the International Space Station. They built an entire 120% scale of the International Space Station down at Shepperton, which is one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. It's bigger than the real thing, so they can get the cameras in and out. And of course, the whole film is in zero gravity. So this is a shot, just a slow tracking shot. You can see one of the scientists is there asleep in his pod. This is the pod of the main scientist guy, who's a microbiologist, and this is a shot. So if you just look at this area here, which is where they keep their personal effects, this is my photo of it. Oh, look, it's my book. How did that get there? Oh. But also, look, there's Nick Lane's book as well, which is a better book than that one. If you want to read a book about the origin of life, get that one. Is this one on sale at the back? No, it's not on sale at the back, so don't worry about it. All right, so this is my interaction with aliens in movies so far. Life is going to be a terrific film. That's out in May next year. Annihilation is going to be one of the great films of the 21st century, and that's out in September next year. Now, people who know me know that I care about films, they know that I care about science fiction films, and they know that I love the alien films. So there are 3 alien films. There's Alien, 1979. Then there was Aliens, which, a small confession, sometimes angers nerds. I actually like Aliens more than I like Alien. Okay, fine. And Alien 3, which I also think is a really good effort although quite flawed. I understand that there were subsequently some other films in that same universe, but I refuse to acknowledge their existence. Now, when Jim sent the email around saying, would you like to do this event, this is the email itself. And as you can see, it says, Jim, there's Dallas, Louisa, these are the things you'd like to do. And I just want to highlight my sentence. Aliens in popular culture, I leave you to decide what you want to say, thank you, but just don't go on about fucking Prometheus. Well, I'm sorry, Jim. Prometheus. Now, I don't really care that much about scientific accuracy in movies. I care when it's ridiculous. I care when it's completely stupid. I really care about good films. And so Prometheus is not a good film, and it's not a good film for many, many reasons, most of which are the nonsensical plot. But it's got some fucking awful science in it as well. And I feel like I'm justified in pointing this out because it's also such a terrible film. Now, this is the title card. And the lettering mocks the original Alien lettering, which bothers me. It really bothers me, that. This is the title card, which actually comes after the first scene, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. Now, I was willing to be open-minded about this film. But yet, this title card contains some bad science from the word go. So from the very first frames of this film, they had just got it wrong. One phone call would have corrected this. Who can spot what's wrong with this? Not you guys. It's a piece of DNA, right? It's a piece of DNA. All life on Earth has DNA, which is a right-handed helix. This is not a terrible error. It's just factually wrong to have a left-handed one. There is no left-handed DNA on Earth. And it just would have taken one phone call, Ridley, just one call. Which way round does this go? It's the other way round. It's the other way round. Now, again, I can be slightly. A lot of people make this mistake, right? It happens to the best of us. This is a documentary series I made in 2009 called The Cell for BBC 4. There I am sitting in the Eagle pub in Cambridge, where Jim Watson says Francis Crick walked in and said, we've discovered the secret of life. He actually admitted earlier this year that he never said that at all. But why let the facts get in the way of a good story? There I am with a pint of broadside and a left-handed double helix. That was broadcast, and it was pointed out to me by 18 letters that were sent to the BBC. So, we all make these mistakes. I want to go back to the scene before the title card in Prometheus, because it introduces one of the standard tropes of science fiction involving aliens, and this was the third thing that Lewis warned us at the beginning in the green room that we weren't allowed to talk about. What was it? It was the Fermi paradox, the Drake equation, and panspermia. So panspermia is this idea that life on Earth was seeded. It didn't originate on Earth. It was seeded from somewhere else, either directed panspermia by some alien intelligence or just some version where some bacteria or some single-celled organism was floating past and landed on the Earth, and that's where it started. Now, it's a crap scientific idea. It's not a scientific idea at all for two reasons. One is there's no need for it to exist, and there's no evidence for it to exist. Right? And other people talk about that in the book at length. The second reason is it doesn't explain the origin of life at all. It just moves it to somewhere else, right? Which isn't very scientifically interesting. But it comes up in science fiction all the time. Now, this is the opening shot of Prometheus. And this bothers me. This bothers me quite a lot for a number of reasons. So who's seen Prometheus? Oh, shit, I'm so sorry. Right, if anyone hasn't seen Prometheus, there are spoilers about to come, but I really don't care. So the film opens with this guy, who's about 8 feet tall, or possibly a bit taller, standing on this sort of, I think it's Iceland, but it might not be, it's never explained. And he drinks this little vial here, which contains a black liquid, which is never explained. And then he sort of retches, and then his entire body dissolves, and he falls into the water, and then it cuts to, you see his cells dissolving, and the DNA comes out of them. And this is the event that triggers the origin of life on Earth. Right, so you've got this guy, this very human-looking guy, ridiculously muscly human-looking guy, who 4 billion years ago drops his own DNA into some water on the planet Earth. And then 4 billion years later, we turn out looking, after all that evolution, we turn out looking like crap versions of him. Shorter, less muscly, darker skinned versions of none of that. It just doesn't make it doesn't make the slightest bit of sense. It's terrible science fiction here. And the idea of panspermia is quite exciting, and Louisa alluded to when we look for molecules of life in other places off-world, what we're looking for are things like amino acids or elements of DNA, and that is what astrobiologists do. That's what the missions on Mars are for. They're looking for the traces of life, or evidence that life might have existed, evidence of metabolism. We haven't actually had a life-seeking mission on Mars since Viking in the 1970s. Is that correct? Specifically looking for life, and this is a slice through the Murchison meteorite. The Murchison meteorite landed in Australia in 1969, and it was a big carbonaceous meteorite, so full of carbon. And a few years ago, a team based at Imperial, led by Zita Martins, who's another astrobiologist and friend of ours, demonstrated that not only did it contain a bunch of amino acids, which we find all over the place, but it also contained uracil, and uracil is one of the letters of the genetic code, specifically found in RNA. And part of her work was to demonstrate that this wasn't contamination, it wasn't from us, it wasn't from Earth, it was generated in space. Now that is profoundly interesting. It says something about chemistry, it says something about the chemistry of life that we rely on. We find it quite difficult to synthesize uracil, but it turns out that the universe does not. Now this is a superb result. It does not say that life was seeded from space. It says that the elements of life and some of the building blocks of life are available in environments which aren't on Earth, and that's really important. Anyway, back to Prometheus. So that the muscly alien, the muscly alien was just one of the aliens in this completely confusing film. So you've got the muscly alien who is the seed of all life on Earth. You've got the alien, which turns up at the end, also incomprehensibly. But whilst they're investigating this planet, two scientists, one of whom is a geologist and the other of whom is a biologist, and I do think he might be the single worst scientist in the history of science, they come across this worm thing, which is kind of cool. I think, according to the narrative of the film, this must be the first time that anyone has seen a living alien in the history of humankind. So this is a pretty significant event. They see a worm, and they look down on it, and because he's the worst scientist in the world, possibly in history, the first thing he does is take his helmet off. We have protocols for this. Takes his helmet off and sort of does this coochie-coo thing at this worm, at which point it rears up into this position to reveal that it's not just a phallus, but it's actually a terrifying fanged vagina. And this is what happens. Right. That is enough. Is that enough on? I've only got 2 minutes left. That's enough on Prometheus. I could talk about Prometheus all night. It's been like therapy for me. I've gone through all of the stages. Anger. Sorry about the swearing. Anyway, I'm going to go from the worst science fiction in history to the best. So, my thesis in the book is that there really are only two ways you can get aliens right in cinema. And the first is to ignore biology on Earth. Right? If we reran the tape of evolution and you altered any single parameter, we would not turn out looking like the way we do today. It's an impossible thought experiment, but that is just the way evolution would work. So in science fiction, I think there is one way of doing it is to say, well, let's not do evolution at all. Let's not hypothesize what evolution might turn out like if we reran the tape. Let's just do something which is incomprehensible to us, but like Anil was talking about the octopuses, it clearly has consciousness. It has a consciousness that we simply do not understand. And of course, the greatest science fiction of all time is 2001, one of the best films of all time. And in that, the monolith is representative of that consciousness. It is different from us. We do not understand it. They do not attempt to explain it. And that's why it works so well. Another example is in Solaris, which is a terrific film made 3 times. I think this one is the best, in which the planet is the consciousness. And again, no attempt to explain it. It simply is a manifestation of a level of cognition and intelligence which is incomprehensible to us, but mysterious and interesting. Now, the second, that's one way of doing it. The second way is to make the aliens identical to us for the purposes of the script. And there are loads of good examples and loads of terrible examples for it. I'm just going to whip through them in the last couple of minutes. They Live, John Carpenter film. This is aliens disguising themselves as us in order to enact their nefarious plans. Similarly, I'm sorry about showing this for people of a certain age, because now you won't sleep again. The clown Pennywise from It is also an alien who comes dressed not just as a human, but as a terrifying clown. Then, of course, you've got characters from the DC universe, Kara Zor-El, Superman's much more talented cousin. And then this chap, who, well, no one has convinced me that he was human in the first place. Wherever he is now, it's not Earth. That was the man who fell to Earth. And then I want to give you a couple of crap examples of why aliens get used in humanoid form. The most obvious is because it's just budget. Right? It's much cheaper to put a man in a shiny suit. Plan 9 from Outer Space, if anyone's seen it, is a superbly bad film. I mean, it's awful. It's an absolutely awful film, but it's a delight to watch. Proper wobbly, flying saucers and sets that move, and a terrible, terrible script. Actors mostly featuring local celebrities like vampire impersonators and a wrestler. And the director, Edward's chiropractor, who replaced Bela Lugosi, who died 2 days into filming, and the chiropractor was a foot taller than Bela Lugosi, but they got around this by he wore a cape around his face like this. But, brilliant piece of film trivia this, it wasn't even the same cape because Bela Lugosi was buried in the cape. None of that's relevant, I just like telling that story. And then you got examples like in Avatar in 2009, which I think is just a crushing lack of imagination to make their aliens just humanoid, a little bit cat-like, give them a tail, make them sort of wise, indigenous population. This is a sort of guilt about colonialization film. It's an absolutely dreadful film. Hey! And then to round things off nicely, where we started with Jim, one of my favorite films of all time and one of my favorite science fiction films of all time is, of course, Contacts. There is Jodie Foster about to enter. Who hasn't seen this? Okay, spoiler alert. You do need to see this film. I'm about to ruin it for you. So after she goes through the wormhole, she lands on a beach somewhere in Vega. And it's obviously not a beach because the sky is shimmering and the color scheme is wrong. And then you see this shimmery figure approach her, and she's thinking, what is this? This is the alien that sent this message. And what it turns out to be is her father. Okay? Now, her father died when she was 10, and people criticize this for being sort of base sentimentality, but I think it's brilliant. I think it's a brilliant move, and I think this is why Carl Sagan got it so absolutely perfect. Because, not just because of who it is, but because she works it out in seconds. He says, there's my scientist. She said, when I was unconscious, you downloaded my thoughts. And he says, yes, we thought this would be easier for you. And I just want to leave you, because I'm now over time, aren't I, with 2 quotes, both from Contact, both from the book and the film. The first is something in reference to what Lewis was talking about, which is just so neat. It's just so Carl Sagan as well. When you look at that picture of the galaxies that Lewis was showing, it says it so clearly. What an awful waste of space if it's just us. But, and this I think is more important, what we're really looking for in science fiction and astrobiology, and looking for life on other planets and looking at extremophiles, we're really looking at ourselves. And I think that's what science and science fiction does better than anything else. It allows us to understand ourselves. And that is the concluding line of Contact, and that's the concluding line of my 18 minutes. Thank you very much.